Westside Jeff back with you on July 4th, Independence Day. I hope you've had a wonderful Independence Day with family, with friends, and parades and activities in your community. Our politicians from Washington are not in D.C. right now. They're right here back in the district. Our guys are right here, and those who represent us in North Texas and all across the state, they're back home. They're attending all kinds of festivities like you and I are. They're hosting parties and functions and social things, and they're doing a bunch of things. They're working harder than ever before. Number one is getting the ear of the voters in their districts, but also working fundraising. This is the time. July 4th historically is the time at which candidates really start campaigning for the elections. This is an anomaly this year, how the election for president really started much earlier. It's a very unusual scenario. I want to get into kind of where we are. You know, what's the status as of right now on Thursday night of July 4th in North Texas. So it was a week ago tonight that the debate occurred, and the Democrats say Joe Biden had a bad performance, and we know the rest of the story. So what happens after the fact? My background, I've been in the media space for almost 40 years in the communications business. I've worked in campaigns and with campaigns, even met and interacted a little bit with Howard Dean when he was the presidential nominee at the time before he blew it. He came in and I sat down one-on-one with him. So I've got some insight on how these things go and what happens. I want to bring you up to speed on my analysis, my opinion, my thoughts on what's happening, why it's happening, and what to expect moving forward. So for now, Team Biden and Team DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and the White House, the three of them collectively are working together to do all kinds of damage control, and that's what we're seeing now. They immediately last Thursday night put together their talking points and got them out to the top 20 or so folks within the party, and that's Schumer, Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, the chair of the DNC, the re-election campaign. They went to those folks to make sure they're all on the same page to say, how do we message this? And that's the messages you're hearing. So it's damage control. They went to their most important influencers and their surrogates so that they're all singing from the same hymnal and that they are united on their front and continue to support Joe Biden. But what they didn't tell anybody, that top 15, 18, 20 folks, is this is just buying them time. They knew they've got to buy time to strategize because this is not just a minor issue. This is a major, significant, this is earth-shattering. This is equivalent to run on the banks. Nobody's got money. That kind of earth-shattering news. But their communication strategy was to get them through a week and a half, 2 weeks, so they can reassure themselves and their partners and their teams that they're good. Now, they all knew last Thursday night was not just a bad night, rather a devastating night. And the American people, we've been seeing this all along from Joe, ever since he's been in office, tripping up and down the stairs of Air Force One, all the verbal blunders, all the moments of him freezing up and not knowing where he is or what he's doing. How many times we've seen him on stage, he's turned to his left to shake someone's hand and there's nobody there. We've seen this. The media has done their best to cover all that up, but you can't pull the wool over your eyes and my eyes. We've seen it. And Democratic supporters have said, well, he's an older gentleman. He's fine. His policies are great. We'll put up with a little bit of that. That's their mentality. The average Democratic voter says, I'll put up with a little bit of that if that keeps Trump out of office. You see, their goal is one thing: defeat Trump. Because in their mind, Trump defeats democracy. I'll talk about that after the bottom of the hour. Now, the American electorate, especially those of us on the right, have been talking about this for 2 years. Democrats have not, and the supporters have not. It's been a sort of dog whistle to them. They know it's an issue. They know it's been an issue. They just haven't wanted to address it. And quite honestly, I think many in the Democratic Party, the average voter, didn't know it was this bad. But you can't avoid what they saw on TV last Thursday night. It's on tape. You can't undo what you saw. Now, after Thursday night's dog whistle can't be ignored, this is an issue for us that a man has lost his cognizance, and he's just not capable of executing the office of the presidency today or 6 months from now, let alone a re-election. Now, the important Dems whose opinions drive action, and I'm talking Representative James Clyburn, South Carolina. Remember, Biden's president because of Representative James Clyburn in South Carolina. He drug him up through the ranks and got him elected. The other ones who drive action, whose opinions really matter, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, they're all, for the most part, saying the right things, except for Nancy, who came out the other day that said, this is a good question. Is this a condition or was it a performance? She broke ranks, but that's because Nancy's old, decrepit, and she's getting mentally unstable too. So you notice you won't see a lot of Nancy on the news after that. They're gonna. Somebody went to Nancy and said, "You can't say that. We got to keep you out of the public because we can't have any screw ups on that." That went against their script. But the group leading this charge are really trying to do all they can to control the narrative. And that buys them 2 to 3 weeks. And they want 2 to 3 weeks for very, very specific reasons. I'll tell you why in about 4.5 minutes. That's the time frame you got to watch. You got to look at what comes out in about 2 weeks from now, and I'll tell you what to look for and why that's important and how to interpret that. Again, that's coming up in 4 minutes. But for now, you've got James Clyburn, who's saying, for the most part, the right things. He's the representative out of South Carolina. You got Nancy Pelosi that had a slip up, so you won't see a lot of her on TV and being quoted as a surrogate of Joe Biden anytime soon. You got Hakeem Jeffries, who's fell in line and good, and Chuck Schumer also. Those are the folks you're going to see. Those are the folks you're going to see speaking on behalf of Joe Biden, and you're going to see it over the holiday. Coming up in about 3.5 minutes, I want to tell you what to look for in about 2 weeks, because that's the next point of their communications plan, their ops plan, on how to get Joe Biden, reformulate him. I'm Westside Jeff, and for Chris Krok on News Talk 820, WBAP, and now on FM 93.3. Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok. Chris is back next week. I'm fortunate enough to get a chance to sit here and sit in the chair in the studio. And one of the things I love about talk radio, I call it a conversation with the community. That's what this is. It's just an opportunity for me to voice my opinion and share a lot of what you're thinking about and share it with you. Have a conversation with the community. You can always jump in, weigh in, and participate if you'd like. I'm across social media at Westside Jeff on Facebook and on X, formerly known as Twitter, also Instagram. Are the ways to reach out to me. I get messages a lot during the show, so thank you for listening. Thomas, Jane, and Donnie, thanks for being a part of the show and weighing in tonight. I appreciate it very much. Jeff is named Westside Jeff. We're talking about the fallout from the debate performance. I framed it a minute ago that I'm telling you what the fallout is from the debate from Thursday night and what the plan is from the Democratic National Committee, the re-election campaign, and Team Biden. And they're following the script exactly as I would have laid it out. My background is in campaigns and politics and also talk radio. I'm going to tell you exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what to expect and what they're waiting for and what to look for. So step one of what they did is pull together the 10, 12, 18 most important Democrats in the country, get them all singing from the same hymnal, and continue to be surrogates supporting Joe Biden, which they've done, except for Nancy Pelosi yesterday, who came out and said it's a legitimate question to ask whether the performance last week was an episode or a condition. So because of that, you're not going to hear much from Pelosi a lot over the next couple days. So expect her to not be on your TV screens. The next thing is this. What they're doing is they're buying time. they want to buy time to see how bad this debate performance and the fallout from this affects voter sentiment. So right now, as you and I are talking, especially through the 4th of July, there's a lot of polling going on. A lot of groups are doing polling. Everybody and their brother's doing polling to try to figure out how the post-debate performance, what's going on in the mind of the voter is how bad did it hurt Biden and what the bounce is. Is Trump getting bounce? In other words, are persuadables moving over to Trump, or are persuadables saying, no, I'm still a Democrat, I'm not voting for Trump, but I'm not going to vote for Biden? They want to see three things. Number one, is Trump getting bounce? Is his numbers going up? Are the number of people who are going to vote for Donald Trump going up? Are they holding steady, or are they falling? They're not going to fall. They'll either go, and they're not going to hold steady. They'll go up. The question is, do they go up 1 point or 12 points? Because whether it's 1 or 12, there's a different plan for each of those. But the most important one is Biden. The likely voters. Is it the likely voters who are persuadable, is it 1% less of them are going to vote for Biden now because of that? Or is it 12%? Again, depending on the outcome of those numbers, it's going to dictate their plan moving forward. So you got to watch that. And when I say polls, yeah, we've seen 1 or 2 polls, including this afternoon, today, on post-debate polling. They don't want to see 1 poll or 2 polls. They want 2 to 3 weeks to go by where they can see 24 polls. They want Monmouth. They want Quinnipiac. They want the New York Times. They want the Washington Post. They want 24 polls. If 24 polls come out between now and a week and a half or 2 weeks from now, and all of them are horribly negative, their next action is going to be different than if 24 polls are released over the next week and a half, and 8 of them are real positive and show that people think it's a bad performance and Joe can turn it around. The Stephanopoulos interview helps, and so on and so on. And 12 of them say Trump got 1 point percentage bounce gain and Biden lost 1 percentage point. That's a different scenario. If 12 polls come out and say Biden lost a point, Trump gained a point, and voters are open to see what happens, that's a completely, totally different scenario than what it would be is if 24 polls come out and say Biden absolutely botched it and they got to replace him. So that's what they're doing. They're buying time to figure out how do we attack this. And it starts with the sentiment of the voters. So the voter sentiment is very, very important. After that, they really want to see what irreparable harm has been done and whether there's recovery from that, if there's an opportunity to recover or not. And that'll give them a little bit of news. The next priority they look at, the next tier of their plan, will be getting to donors. They got to get to all their big donors. They got to get to the Democrats got to get to the groups, the big money donors, but big individual donors also. And when I talk about organizational groups, I'm talking watch them reach out to labor unions, IBEW, the International Bureau of Electrical Workers, AFSCME, big union. Priorities USA is a big contributor to the Democratic Party. The UAW. Those high level Democrats will be reaching out to those union bosses and the CFOs of those organizations to ask for financial support and moral support. And if all of them turn their backs on Team Biden, he's done. But I think they can buy time with polling. So if polling has some positives in it, they can use that to turn some heads. This is a sales pitch is what they're doing. They're in the middle of the greatest sales presentation of their life. I don't think they're going to pull it out, but that's what they're doing. The third level of influence they're looking at is Congress. Now, here's the really important part you've got to understand of what we're seeing today in the news. We saw this earlier today. There are 33 U.S. Senate seats up for re-election this fall. 23 of those Senate seats are Democrats, or 4 of them are people who caucus with the Democrats. And right now, the Senate is favors the Democrats because of Kamala Harris's tie vote. But if they find out, as polling goes, time goes, that they're going to lose 6 seats in the U.S. Senate, that creates a big problem. So they're watching these Senate seats. And when you've got 33 Senate races up and 23 of them Democrat, that's a huge, huge liability they have. They certainly are watching House races. Every House member is up for re-election. They want to see House members and what's going on in those races. That's also why Representative Lloyd Doggett from Austin came out Tuesday and said it's time to withdraw from the race, Mr. President, and go on to what's next, because he's fighting for down ballot race. He's fighting for his down ballot. He's fighting for his livelihood. He wants to win. He's concerned that Joe Biden, top of the ticket, is going to cost him his seat at the bottom of the ticket. The third thing they're looking at in those down ballot races is governor races. There are 3 Democratic governor races up this fall. Typically, that's not significant, but here's why it is. The 3 races to watch: John Carney in the state of Delaware is a Democrat. If John Carney, who's a Democrat, it's a lock that he would win. But if he starts polling away and becomes competitive in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, that's a problem. The second one is Roy Cooper in New York, in North Carolina. Roy Cooper is a Democrat in North Carolina. That's going to be battleground state number 1 in this country for the president, North Carolina. And Roy Cooper is going to be a significant factor in that, with it being a battleground state. The other one, Democratic governor that's up, is Jay Inslee in Washington state. That should not be a problem. He should win. It's a Democratic state. Boy, if that flips, we really have problems. Thursday night was not just a bad night, and now it's an OPSCOM problem. And one of the things they're saying is the alternatives, meaning Trump winning or Kamala taking over, is worse. And their attack on Trump is democracy's under attack. That's their pitch. Democracy's under attack. It's not playing with you and me. It is playing with Democrats. I'll explain the democracy under attack thing right after the bottom of the hour news. Coming up in about 2 minutes, we have the news. On the other side of that, I'm going to tell you what democracy under attack looks like. I'm Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok tonight, and back in the seat tomorrow night. Chris is on vacation with his family and friends, and joining Independence Day and July 4th with his family and friends. He'll be back next week, and I'm sure he'll continue the conversation that we're talking about now about what's going on in our country post-debate with Joe Biden. And this is a big, fast-moving story that's ugly on all sides. In about 2 minutes, I want to get into democracy. You know, they tell us that democracy's under attack with Trump. I say democracy's death has been greatly exaggerated. I'll explain it in 2 minutes. It's 4th of July, and I got 2 dogs in my house, Baxter, who's kind of a terrier beagle mix, and Harley, who is a lab. And I forgot until, I keep forgetting every year how tough this time of the year is with dogs. I live in a community where my neighbors like to spend money on big fireworks. And when they start lighting off fireworks, Baxter, my terrier, shakes and just is scared to death and just scared of his shadow. And it's like, I hate this time of the year from that perspective because you can't shield him. So I try to create some white noise in the bedroom, but that doesn't work. So lately I've been grabbing the dogs and going down to the basement, which is, I've got a basement area in my home that I'll go down there and sleep for a couple hours with the dogs. It's kind of secluded that they can't hear anything, and it's protective. I hate this time of the year for that, with fireworks. It is what it is. But protect your dog's ears tonight through fireworks, because they don't like it. And if you got any tips on that, I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me across social media at Westside Jeff. Westside Jeff on Facebook and Westside Jeff on X, formerly known as Twitter, but also on Instagram. So if you got any tips on how do you shield your dogs and protect them, what works for you to keep your dogs from going skittish, short of drugging them, I'd love to hear from you. Westside Jeff and for Chris Krok. I want to talk about democracy. The left's talking points right now on the heels of Biden's performance and what's going on and trying to save his presidency, let alone his reelection for 2024, is about they're not selling it as here's the good things Joe Biden has done for you and for America. They're saying the alternative is worse and the alternative is Donald Trump. So instead of telling us here's the good things he's done and why to reelect him, they're saying the world is going to end as you know it if you elect Donald Trump. He's going to be a dictator. He's going to tear down democracy. That's all they can do. That's all they can hang their hat on because they don't have anything good to talk about that they've done good from a policy standpoint. This administration has not done anything to make my life better. Now, in normal election years, in years past, that debate last week would have been the end of Joe Biden's long career. And this goes to that point I'm talking about. You know, and I know his you know what, 12 years ago, if that debate had taken place, he's done. He's done. But we live in an era right now in the world of politics. The rules of engagement have changed. Politics has changed forever. We are not living in an era where politics is what it was 12, 16, 20 years ago. It's a whole new dynamic today. It's changed forever. So as somebody who watches politics one way or another, you've got to understand Donald Trump changed it forever. It's never going back to the way it was. Never. So let's clear your head. It's changed forever. It's all about Trump. This isn't any normal election. Biden's opponent is Donald Trump, and regular political order is suspended. This is anti-Trump. You see, much of the country, including most of the media right now, and all the Democratic Party, they're convinced that a second Trump administration presents a unique threat to democracy. And for this reason, Trump has to be stopped. That's their talking point. He's horrible. We got to stop him. Threat to democracy. And they're willing to do it even if doing so requires, well, let's just call it subverting democracy, even if it's them that has to interfere with democracy. Now, it's worth remembering that those now warning us about dangers of a second Trump presidency and tearing down this democracy, it's the same people who rejected the first Trump presidency. Powerful members of the intelligence and law enforcement communities, they tried to derail Trump in 2016 and 2020, a point that democracy's defenders, they sort of ignore today. They don't want to talk about that. They want to say Trump is going to tear down democracy, but they don't want to talk how they did it. Prominent Democrats like Hillary Clinton to Hakeem Jeffries outlandishly claimed Russia stole 2016 election for Trump. And the Save Democracy crowd shrugged. Well, in calling for Biden to step aside, New York Magazine's David Remnick describes the election as a referendum on democracy itself. And he asserts that a Trump victory would mean diminishment of liberal democracy. You might expect an explanation or a few bullet points on the back heels of that, short of just saying liberal democracy, but you don't get it. You see, liberals and progressives, they've been retailing that language for so long, they think that the threat to democracy explains itself, and it just doesn't. So my question is, how could a presidential election be a referendum on democracy? Well, the American people elected Trump in 2016. They rejected him in 2020. They may elect him again in 2024. They may not. That's what democracy is. You win some races, you lose some races. What does it say about democracy if the people running major media outlets and one or two of the major political parties don't trust the judgment of American people? You see, the New York Times editorial board, in calling for Biden to step aside, got closer to defining Trump's supposed threat to democracy by saying if he returned to office, he has vowed to be a different kind of president, unrestrained by the checks on power and built into the American political system. So I get it. You see, what they're telling me is that Trump will do things other presidents don't do, right? Like foster division, prosecute his political opponents, defy the Supreme Court, encourage lawlessness. Please, please, New York Magazine, tell me more about these issues and threats to democracy. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear more about that. So Remnick has a thought on that. I'll continue that conversation. Got to hit a quick break on the other side of this in about 3.5 minutes. I'll continue the conversation on what he says about Trump and democracy. I'm Westside Jeff, in for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff in for Chris Krok. We're talking about the threat to democracy and what the Democrats are trying to deploy their plan to get Trump to lose and focus the attention away from Biden. I talked about the fact that the New York Magazine wrote a good piece about threat to democracy, and it's Remnick is his name, David Remnick, and the New York Times editorial board, when they went through this, they called for Biden to step aside, and they got closer to defining Trump's supposed threat to democracy. They said if Trump is returned to office, he's vowed to be a different kind of president, unrestrained by the checks on power built into the American political system. That infers that Trump will do things other presidents have never done, and they infer things like foster division. Let's see. Joe Biden, that infers prosecute his political opponents, Joe Biden, that infers defying the Supreme Court, let's see, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, the Democrats, and that infers encouraging lawlessness, Democrats. So that's their concern. Guess what? They're the ones that are really thwarting democracy. Now, Remnick in the piece says that Trump has an undeniably authoritarian personality, whatever that means. I don't know what authoritarian means. Trump, is he thin-skinned? Yes. Is he narcissistic? Yes. Is he uncouth? Yes. Does he lack PC? Yes. Is he distractible? Hell yes. But Americans already know that. That's what they elected. When we elected Trump in 2016, we elected the man because he's not a politician. He's an outsider. He's not what we think of in politics as politicians. And that's why political gamemanship, the world of politics has changed forever when we elected Trump. Because we, the American people, said we don't want a politician. We want somebody who's going to break the system. We want somebody who's going to change it. We want somebody who's going to be a change agent. The Democrats haven't understood that yet, haven't comprehended that yet, and don't get it yet. Now, Trump's life plan, let's go back to Trump before he ran for office. His plan wasn't to become the standard bearer of right-wing populism. He never wanted to run for office. He fell into it. And remember, he was a Democrat before he was a Republican. Hell, he was a Democrat most of his life. And here's what gets me about democracy, threat to democracy. Donald Trump has neither the political vision nor the executive capacity as the president of the United States to do something as ambitious as dismantling democracy. He doesn't have the power to do that. Hell, if he did, he'd have the power to fix the wars, fix the economy and everything else, but he doesn't. No president does. Democracy has other threats which we have to contend with. Where was this New Yorker guy Remnick when Chuck Schumer bellowed that Justice Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh would, quote unquote, pay the price if the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade? Where was Remnick when the Democrats said we're going to go to Gorsuch's house and Kavanaugh's house and protest in front of their personal houses? Where were they when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade? Where were they when they said that the Supreme Court would pay the price. Where were these guys when the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg ran on a promise to put the likely Republican nominee Donald Trump in prison, a former president? Where's the threat to democracy for that? You know where they were? They were nodding their head. That's where they were. You see, January 6th of 2021 still looms large in all the talk of democracy's waning days, and they're using that as their platform. Nothing like it has ever happened in our lifetime, and hopefully it never does again. But when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, the Constitution is what held them back. The law came down on everyone involved like an anvil. By contrast, when left-wing radicals took to the street in the summer of 2020 and when they occupied college campuses just a few months ago, like Columbia University, and tore the hell out of that, Democrats cheered them on and bailed them out. All political violence is unacceptable, they said, but some is more acceptable than others. You see, when you and I use the word democracy, we don't mean only elections. We mean the whole constitutional arrangement, free speech, the ability to get on talk radio, share your opinion without being bullied or shamed into something, the separation of powers, the civil rights, the freedom of the press. American democracy is liberty. It's justice. It's liberty and justice for all. From Molly Pitcher to Thomas Jefferson to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. It's two parties. It's Republican. It's Democrat. It's government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's what democracy is. American democracy is a survivor. It has ended. It's endured wars. It's endured assassinations. It's endured depressions and terrorist attacks. It won't be dismantled easily. It can, however, be used as a sharp stick like Democrats are doing, and they've shown, labeling Republican presidential candidates as wannabe authoritarians, as dictators, how explicit it can be. Reagan planned, according to the Democrats, he planned to declare martial law and start a nuclear war. He didn't. The George W. Bush signed the Patriot Act. They said that was spying on librarians. No, that never happened either. They said Joe Biden told a black audience that Mitt Romney was going to put y'all back in chains. That hasn't happened either. That's because democracy is alive. So now Trump's candidacy is more than just a bad deal for liberals and the issues that they care about. It's hair on fire, threat to democracy itself, and Democrats wonder why Republicans yawn. They want to know, hey, why aren't you guys listening to talk radio engaged on threat to democracy? Well, we're yawning about it because you're a blowhard. You see, the motivations of us, the motivations of you, the motivations of me, of Trump supporters are still 8 years later, poorly understood by political class. Republicans aren't falling in behind. They're not following Trump because they hate democracy. We're not supporting Trump because we don't like democracy. We're not championing Donald Trump because we want to tear down democracy. No, we like it. It's been good to me. The First Amendment has been a very good thing for me. The freedom of the press has been good when they do their job. We'll talk about that after the top of the hour news that's coming up in about 4 minutes. It's been good for me throughout my life. Democracy is alive and well. You see, every 4 years, democracy allows Republicans to sidestep the biased media. We'll talk about that again in 4 minutes on the other side of the top of the hour news. It's allowed us to sidestep the biased media and the permanent bureaucracy and go directly to the people is what that's given politicians the opportunity today to do. Now today, as in 2016 and as in 2020, Red American wants to give Washington a smack in the face. We want to take our country back. We want to do it by voting for Trump. That's not a threat. That's democracy. You see, the real detractors of democracy has been the Democratic Party. I call it groupthink. If you as a group, if me and you as a group don't think like they do, we are a threat to their democracy. We need to send a signal. We will send a signal. You're seeing it play out now with Joe Biden. You're seeing it go after that. You're seeing it be a problem. And the first part of that occurred this week with the media. I'll tell you about that in about 3.5, actually top of the hour news. Then on the other side of that, we'll get into that. I'm Westside Jeff, in for Chris Krok on News Talk 820 WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3.